actually recorded. And then I'm going to pass on to Mary to get started.
Thanks so much, Sadie. I'm just going to share my screen. So hopefully, can you just let me know if you can see this slideshow?
Yes.
There should be a photo. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming this evening. This is, yeah, just a really exciting opportunity, I think, to learn some more about this huge company, Glencore, and also about the work we can do here in the UK and in Europe to act in solidarity with communities in the global south and in other countries in the world who are facing extractivism at the hands of Glencore. So this nice photo is of a demo we did a few weeks ago outside Glencore's offices in London. But before I talk kind of about our campaign, I just wanted to quickly talk about who Glencore actually are. So Glencore is actually one of the biggest companies in the whole world. They're the biggest trading and mining company, and then they're also like the 23rd biggest company in terms of revenue of every single company of every single industry. So they are huge. And maybe some of you know who they are already, but actually lots of people don't know who they are. And a big reason for that is because they oversee mining activities and they make up these contracts with big companies that we do know the names of, people like Apple, Google, and Dell, who make computers. So we know those big companies, and we also know companies like Shell and BP because they directly sell their commodities of oil and petrol directly to us. Whereas people like Glencore, they're not selling all the things they mine directly to a consumer. So they're quite hidden behind the industries that they prop up. But actually, they are responsible for a lot of destruction in the world and for huge amounts of emissions and carbon bomb projects that are obviously contributing massively to climate collapse. So, yeah, Glencore are very, very good at hiding. And actually, there's been lots of articles that have cited Glencore under this name of the biggest company you've never heard of, which I think is really true. I myself didn't know much about Glencore 2 years ago. And now, actually, the more you research, the more you realize that, actually in your hand right now, in your phone or your laptop or your tablet, there will be a metal in there that has most likely come from a Glencore owned mine somewhere in the world. Similarly, in other technological products we have, lots of the products come from Glencore owned mines. So I guess, how is a company that is just based out of Switzerland and the UK so huge? So just for some context, Glencore have mines in 35 countries around the world. And some of these mines are absolutely huge. If you're interested, you can research into their mines and you can see across Australia, across Colombia, and across the Democratic Republic of Congo, they have these huge mines that you can actually see on Google Maps. That's how huge they are. Just for context, one of them in Colombia is 6 times the size of the city of Paris. So this is really the scale that this international corporation is working at. And they are, of course, mining huge amounts of minerals, metals, and also coal from these mines. And so something so big and something that creates so much profits, obviously there's something not great happening behind the scenes, because of course there's people living on this land, and there's also whole ecosystems, many animals, trees, species who inhabit this land as well. And so Glencore, ultimately, to paraphrase, these huge profits that they have in these huge mines come off the dispossession and the displacement of people, of habitats, and of ecosystems. So really, Glencore functions because it has to force people off land, take over this land, destroy ecosystems, divert rivers and waterways in order to function. And also, like other companies in the West, they rely heavily on low paid labor and exploitative labor to make these huge profits. So yeah, they really basically are the worst. But we're going to get on to kind of what we can do to resist them. But it's really important to note that just as it has been in the past, it is very similar communities who are being dispossessed and displaced from their land. And in particular, especially in South and North America, it is indigenous communities who have been dispossessed the most and who do not have access to land that their families and their bloodlines have been on for centuries. And something that really in the West, we may not be able to feel that connection to land in the same way. And that's why it's extremely important that we do this work to reconnect. So yeah, that's a very, very brief overview of Glencore. And yeah, there's so much more to go over really with them in detail, but really they are just this huge mining company. They create billions and billions of pounds of profit for themselves every year. And yeah, they're based out of the UK and Switzerland. So yeah, basically, so who are we? We are a campaign group called Resist Glencore, and we were set up about a year and a half ago at the start of 2023. And really, this has come out of, I guess, just horror at really what I've just discussed at this huge company, Glencore, and what they've done, and specifically what they've been doing in Colombia against the Yupka and Wayu indigenous communities who live in the north of Colombia there. And so really we've tried to create a campaign that's built on amplifying the voices of affected communities and really trying to build actual effective bridges of justice and change and reparations, listening in the global north from communities affected in the global south. So here we have a picture of Esneda and her husband Chiche here on the left. And Esneda was meant to speak tonight and may still hopefully be joining us. So this was last year, about this time last year. And these photos are actually outside of Glencore's offices in London. And we were lucky enough to be part of a campaign to bring Esneda and Chiche here to London, but also into different parts of Europe to basically spread their message, to tell the truth of what Glencore is doing on their land, and also fundamentally to speak at Glencore's AGM, which was held in Switzerland last year. And this was just an incredible opportunity, not only just to hear their experiences and hear their asks to hear their demands, but also to really cut through the greenwashing that companies like Glencore try to do. Because when you have these powerful figures, these powerful community leaders speaking their truth and telling the truth, it cuts through the facade that companies like Glencore tried to put up. So really, them being able to speak in the AGM and telling the truth of how their communities have been affected was just incredible. And of course, we all learned a huge amount from that experience, and really looking at how in the West we can actually try and act in active solidarity with these affected communities and listen to their demands. It was, just incredible. So hopefully we can still hear her talk tonight, but if not, I'm sure we can create other opportunities because her words are just incredible. And this was an amazing chance. And they also went to the UK, Switzerland, France, and Germany, and met with different political figures and just like different climate groups to really like talk about mining justice. And I think, I'm going to get onto this in a bit, but really, was just an incredible part of that. So that was really like a big thing we did to start off this campaign. And since then, we've basically continued this. These are just some photos from stuff that we've done in the UK. So this building you can kind of see twice here. This is the London offices. So they're based in central London. They have these fancy offices. They don't have their sign up saying their name because I guess they know people will hate them and they'll know, and we'd know who they were. But we've held some really effective protests outside. We've got loads of leaflets. We've been speaking to people who work around there and also just holding workshops to continue spreading this message about who Glencore are and what they do, and how they're able to affect communities so much. And every time we go to their offices, and you can kind of see in the background of this photo on the bottom left, they have the security, they get police, people stand to protect their offices, even if we're just doing peaceful demonstrations. And that really brings home how much these companies are protected by the state, no matter what they do, no matter how they're affecting communities and nature and the climate around the world. They're so protected. And that's why it's so important that in this country, we continue to raise awareness and hold these demos and resist. Briefly, I just want to talk about this banner in the bottom right corner, which says Glencore Stop Fueling Genocide. So this was a banner we had at our last demo last month. And what this refers to is that Glencore, they have these, they export a lot of coal from the coal mines they own in Colombia, and they were selling this coal to Israel because Israel imports a lot of fossil fuels for its energy. So yeah, this was basically something that we were trying to campaign about. And actually, recently, the Colombian government have said that they are trying to, or have basically, are stopping the sale of Colombian coal to Israel due to its genocidal assault on Palestinians. So that is actually a slight win for once, which is amazing. And yeah, it was just really good to combine that messaging and to like spread that awareness of that as well at our last demo. And I guess what I really want to talk about here is, and like especially with this banner that we have, mining justice for the global south, is how can we really create effective solidarity here in the global north, or really in Britain, in such a so-called global superpower that is really responsible for much of the ecocide and assault on indigenous people that we see across the world. And of course, first of all, Britain and Europe are really responsible for the structures that have allowed for this continual colonialization of countries and for corporations such as Glencore to continue with this violence that they do. So it's actually very easy for Glencore to go onto land and to evict indigenous communities and to commit such ecocide, because that's been going on for 500 plus years in the countries that they're going into. And it's been British corporations or British militaries who have always done that. So these structures are the same. And really, they're never going to go away until we collectively create another system. And so, yeah, the first thing is really addressing the causes. How has this been allowed to happen? And we're never going to prevent climate collapse while those systems still exist. And I guess, secondly, something that is really important to address here in the UK, and actually, this photo is from the Restore Nature March that happened last week in London. Is really about here in the UK also restoring our own connection to nature and to land, because companies like Glencore kind of rely on our disconnection from nature and our disconnection from our own communities to allow such violence to happen elsewhere. And the more that we can connect to that here, the more we can really see what is happening and encourage people to feel, passionate and campaign for change. And also, and I'm sure Esneda would have spoken about this more if she was here, it's extremely difficult in many countries in the global south. Colombia is just one example. Also in the Congo, in Zambia, Nigeria, it's very difficult to, it's very dangerous is the right word, to protest and to speak out against these multi-billion dollar corporations. They have paramilitaries, they order violence against people who speak out. As Neda herself has actually had two or maybe even more now attempts on her life for speaking out, for trying to protect her land and her communities. And, in the UK, yes, protest laws are getting more difficult, but we do have a lot of freedom and therefore a lot of power to make change. And so it's extremely important that we use that freedom of speech, that we use our power and our safety to speak out in solidarity with communities who are most affected, and to speak out against these companies who have their headquarters and their offices throughout our cities in the UK and in Europe. So that is why, we really can actually make effective change, but at the heart of that change really needs to come solidarity. And there are communities who are most affected speaking out all the time. We just need to listen. And that is really, I guess, at the heart of the campaign we're trying to build as Resist Glencore. And we'd really love to build this movement in the UK and spread this message through the UK and European climate movement. And yeah, at the heart of that, this is lastly, sorry, I know I've been speaking for a while, that the heart of this really is mining justice. So something that in the climate movement in the UK, we regularly are campaigning for is the phasing out of fossil fuels and instead the coming in of renewable energy. But actually, companies such as Glencore, who have massive cobalt mines, zinc mines, and lithium mines, they still do that extremely violently. There are communities are still, people would still lose their lives. Habitats are completely destroyed to mine for the metals for renewable energy that we are demanding here. So, really, we need to envision a world in which our supposedly clean and green energy does not rely on the displacement of others and does not come from violent communities like Glencore. And of course, things like really degrowth and reimagining how we use energy in the West is really at the heart of that. And so unfortunately, things like renewable energy really aren't just a quick fix because companies like Glencore are still responsible for the mining, for the metals and the minerals that are needed for those products. So that's a big question, but it's really exciting opportunity to envision a different world and to listen to the indigenous communities who have been calling for this change for so long. So yeah, I really hope that you're inspired by this campaign and would like to get involved. We'd love to have you involved in the Resist Glencore campaign. I'm just wondering if Helena is free to speak and would like to talk a little bit about the work that the Resist Glencore team have been doing in Colombia. If not, I can try and explain that as well.
Yeah, let me just change the settings here. If Elena would like to come and um, join.
Sure, thank you. Hi.
Um,
Hello, hello. I'm just wondering, sorry, if I think Juan Pablo is connected. I don't know if maybe he could speak or if not, I can definitely do so if you like.
yeah, it looks like Juan Pablo has been in and out. Maybe his connection isn't so good, but maybe
Sure,
do you want
no
to,
worries.
and then I'll restart the interpretation for Tati to be um, doing the translation while you speak.
Okay, perfect. Great. So, okay. Yeah, so thank you so much for everyone. Miri, thank you so much for such a wonderful um speech, for such a wonderful demonstration of what this campaign is. My name is Helena. I'm currently in the UK, but I'm based in Colombia, and I'm working as well on the Colombian side of the campaign. So yeah, currently some of the stuff that we're doing is that we are organizing with baseline communities in the territories most affected by mining. So this include, also indigenous communities like the Yukpas, but as well as peasant communities, Black communities, trade unions, women's communities, and just a diverse set of communities basically in resistance from the mega mining. Um, and we're trying to push forward the demands that they have of what a just transition, a just and popular transition could truly look like, and what they're imagining for post-extractive futures beyond coal mining. Because unfortunately, a lot of the economy in these territories has been based in coal. They're highly dependent, many of them, in this deadly economy. But they're also now reimagining these futures beyond extractivism. So many of the communities that we're working with are essentially trying to go back to the land. They're trying to, base their livelihoods again in what used to be the basis before the mining came, which is, working the land and sustaining themselves through that. So yeah, we're currently organizing a festival that pushes for what is called the corridor of life. as you know, the current proposal of the Colombian government of Petro, is to, you know, leave fossil fuels, and actually, you know, try to build a alternative economy. So we're trying to push for this so that, you know, communities can go back to the land. And in this festival, we want to really, you know, showcase some examples of what these post-extractive futures could look like, and work with the communities to demand for this to happen, right? We're also mobilizing with several universities here in Colombia, because we want to invite the student movements in Colombia to join this effort to demand, you know, truly just and popular transition out of fossil fuels, and importantly also listening to the demands for reparations, because, you know, a just transition could never happen without the holistic reparations that the communities are demanding. So that is some of the work that we're currently doing in Colombia, and yeah, we're really excited to, you know, explore further how we can unite between the global north and the global south to truly demand justice, right, against these corporations.
Thank you so much, Helena. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
When you're talking about when you're talking about reparations, have you heard like what kind of demands for reparations the communities have? Like, what does that concept mean from what you've understood in working with the Yupka communities?
Yeah, so from what I've understood is that reparations have to be seen holistically, in a holistic way, right? So although there is a demand for monetary reparations, that can't be the limit that we look at, right? So that is only a very small part of it. I think, you know, a bigger part of it can be about um, so like social and political reparations, for example, in the recognition that there needs to be truth and reconciliation and a promise of non-repetition, to truly think about, you know, a holistic way of reparation, you know, for these companies to acknowledge the damage that they've done to many of these communities and to the global south in general. um, you know, that's also, that recognition is a massive step, um, but also the fact, you know, that there are also ways of reparation that, you know, we speak about that are, you know, almost hard to grapple, in terms that, you know, aren't bound to our ways of knowledge, right, and our ontologies here in the West. But for example, spiritual reparation with the land, and, you know, other ways that we have to, and that we can imagine reparation beyond just the monetary, but also like in a very holistic way. um yeah, that addresses like how these communities envision, right, the future beyond the mine, but also how the territory must be repaired, right? Like, it's not only about, you know, it's the human and the non-human. It's also about the rivers, all the rivers, more than 5 rivers that have been dried up, all of the species, all of the ancestral plants that have been, you know, gone to extinction because of the mining. So yeah, we have to look, from what I understand is that we have to look at it from the human, but also beyond the human perspective, and also listening, you know, to the land and the territory.
Yeah, thanks. That's such an important perspective to not be looking only at financial reparations, but to be looking more holistically. Um, I have a question for you, Miranda, which is what does um, solidarity mean to you when you're kind of when you're working here in the UK with a group that is on the other side of the world? How has that process been for you?
It's a good question. I think it's really the main thing that I have learned in this whole campaign is it's just so much learning and so much listening. And that really needs to be, I think, at the heart of what we see in like the European climate movement as solidarity, is really just listening and amplifying what the communities who are actually affected are saying and what they're asking for. Because it can be very easy to think, I guess, for example, what I was saying about renewable energy, it can be very easy to think that like there are these easy kind of wins we can aim for that can kind of change everything, and therefore that's climate justice. But really, actually, it needs to come from the workers, from the communities, and from the countries who are first most affected by extractivism at the hands of companies like Glencore, but also who are the most affected by the climate crisis. It's something we actually really cannot connect with massively in the UK, and that's why it's so important to listen and act in solidarity to learn. And so I guess the main thing is the listening, but also like there's so much connections, there's so many bridges that we can build, and that is just incredible. And there's so much work we can do here in the UK to support people to spread their message, and also just to have to listen and to act on their demands. And I think, like a notion that's been at the center of this campaign the whole time is like, what would how would communities who are so affected by Glencore feel if the Glencore offices were right on their doorstep, as they are for us here in the UK or in Switzerland, or like for any community who's impacted by Shell, BP, Exxon. We live in the UK right on the doorstep of these companies, and we should act with the same pain and anger that the communities who are on the front line feel, and we can. And that, there's so much that we can do, both in terms of protest, but also digital actions and getting to insurers and funders. There's a lot actually we can do. And so I guess it's trying to take as many approaches as we can. And we can make it fun, but it's also remembering the suffering that people are going through and acting from that. We can do a lot, basically.
Thanks, Miranda. A question for Helena, which is, why is it so important to focus on the root causes of the problems that we're facing rather than just kind of like the outcomes of, say, what happens in the climate crisis? Like, why is it important to look upstream?
Sure. Thank you, Sally. I think, it's very important to look at the root causes because if not, the solutions might replicate the problem, if that makes sense, right? So, we don't want the solutions to replicate why this we face, right, this climate crisis, which we can see happening, right, a lot. For example, green colonialism, greenwashing, carbon markets, technological fixes, all of this, right? Like, to think that we don't need the depth of change that comes to a going against the wider structures, right, of colonization, of capitalism, of all the kind of power structures that have created the situations that we're in. So I think when we look at the cause and not the consequence, we can actually be like take the problem from the roots and not just trim the outside. Because if not, there's going to be like nettles and weaves where they just keep growing, right? But if we look at the roots, which is the systems of white supremacy, the systems of colonialism, the systems of imperialism that continue to this day, and we realize that these systems have not finished, but are continuous, then we can address the roots of the problem and therefore create a pluriverse of solutions, because there can't not just be one, but there has to be a universe of possibilities.
That's such a beautiful image, the pluriverse of possibilities. I love that. I wanted to, so we're having some connectivity problems from the folks from the Yupka community that we had hoped would join us. But we do have a video which highlights some of their perspectives. So maybe that would be useful to show, just like so that we can hear a little bit from their perspective anyway, if they haven't been able to join us. Hang on a sec. I'm going to share this on my screen. You can see my screen, yes? Can you hear that sound? You can hear the sound. Great.
La serranía del Perijá, la última selva tropical seca que queda en Latinoamérica, fuente de vida del pueblo Yupka y de todos esos campesinos, de todas esas personas que trabajan la tierra. El pueblo Yupka ha sido victimizado, no solo el pueblo Yupka, sino todo ese medio ambiente, toda esa serranía del Perijá. Hoy tiene dos multinacionales explotando alrededor más de 14.000 hectáreas en explotación minera. Tenemos el río Maracas seco, el río Sororia seco, tenemos el río Tucuy seco y contaminado y desviado, sin la plena consulta previa y el consentimiento del pueblo Yupka. Hay que hacer la consulta previa para mitigar todos estos impactos ambientales que se han vivido y que se viven. Tiene que haber reparación ambiental, reparación cultural y reparación social por parte de todo este daño que se ha hecho. La transición mineroenergética nos tiene que salvar la vida. Nosotros, el pueblo Yupka, estamos dispuestos a trabajar y a unir esfuerzos para hacer esta transición. Somos amigos de la vida, somos amigos de la paz, somos amigos del desarrollo propio, del desarrollo orgánico, de las economías propias.
Very beautiful images and powerful words from those representatives. We have someone who's written in the chat in Spanish. Is there maybe, Helena, would you maybe want to translate that comment into English? Maybe you could read it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So it says, in Putumayo, the door to the south of the Amazon in Colombia, we have the presence of a Canadian multinational corporation that insists in extracting copper from the mountains of Mocoa. How can we articulate ourselves to strengthen the strategies, the communicative strategies here in the territory, and that they have an impact outside of the territory too? This multinational has appropriated our discourse and our narrative of what means to have progress, development in the territory, and has a lot of money to sustain itself through time, so it can extract copper with the pretext that this is urgent for the energy transition for developed countries.
So another example of a different mining corporation. Too often they're Canadian, which I'm ashamed to say is my home country. But yeah, absolutely. Under the guise of the energy transition, also, which is such a challenging issue to deal with, also as climate activists. So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to open up the floor for some questions, and then we can try and finish the session a little bit earlier than we had intended. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. And you can feel free to, if you'd like to speak in Spanish, you can do that. And I will just use the interpretation function, and our speakers can respond in English or Spanish. Any questions or also reflections from the group today? Helena, do you want, or Miri, do you want to try answering the question, which is, yeah, which was asked in the chat by Natalie?
It's a huge question. I mean, it's massive, and I firstly just want to say I'm extremely sorry that that is happening. I guess all I can say from our perspective is maybe we can try and research more into that corporation. I'm not sure the name of the company, so if you put it in the chat, maybe we can look at that and like we could be in contact and talk about a campaign together, or like even just researching more into that. I guess what I would, I mean, just keep speaking up about it is what I'd say, and document what you see. But obviously try and do that as safely as you can. I know that can be extremely dangerous to share things from like a personal account, but yeah, I would just say keep documenting and keep sharing that. And I don't know if you're in contact with any climate groups or like even like trade union groups or social justice groups within like the local area or even in the nation, to basically try and link up with and make that a bigger movement. But yeah, in here in the UK we could try and like do more research in that and support you with that struggle. But that, yeah, I'm really sorry that that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another question in the chat from Julia. What do you see as the strongest priority strategy in holding these companies accountable? Maybe.
I can say one thing, I guess. I don't know. I think the biggest thing, especially for Glencore, is that we need to, especially here in the UK and Europe, is basically just really try to damage their reputation, because actually, like, companies and insurers and investors are actually pulling out of big companies, and even Glencore has had millions of pounds taken out of them because they are so harmful, because they are destroying the environment so much, and because their climate action plan is so bad. And so we can really put pressure on investors and insurers, and we can damage their reputation. The more the more people know about who Glencore are and the way they operate, the more people will pull out money. And yeah, that's probably a very long process, but unfortunately, with a company so huge, it's going to be long. And that really, I guess, is a priority strategy, is to make Glencore like as well known as companies like BP and Shell, and like even more well known for like the damage that they cause inside like the climate movement in the UK, but also just like publicly. As we all have products from Glencore, we should know where they come from. So really, I guess, is like trying to damage their reputation in the UK and Europe is so important because that's where all their funders are. Well, most of their funders are here. And so, yeah, I really like, yeah, just want to like empower everyone that there is so much that we can do. And actually, even if like you only could do stuff from home, like there's so much we can do online. We can really actually make a difference. And so, yeah, it can seem really daunting in such a huge company, but there are, yeah, the tide is turning. But that's why having like the messages from the communities at the center is so central. As Helena said, like we're not just trying to switch here to green capitalism and the same extractivism just for renewables. The whole system has to change. But bit by bit, hopefully we can get at their money and try and change it slowly. Yeah, would say.
Absolutely. Helena, did you have anything to add there?
Sure. No, thank you so much, Miri, for that. I would just add, like, I think in a way for both questions, Julia and Natalie, I think, you know, one of the strongest things that we can do is to build, right, like these bridges between the global north and the global south. Like, sure, there are massive power asymmetries, right? Like, as we've mentioned before with colonization and all of that. But I think to realize that we can create powerful allyships like across the north and the south for liberation is, you know, extremely. It creates a lot of hope in the fact that, of course, you know, we face very different realities in the north and the south, but I think it is when we're able to really kind of weave these things together that we can see like lights at the end of the tunnel, right? Like a bit of what Miri was saying. It is, you know, the sad reality that companies like Glencore stand with so much power, yet we're able to grab them like an onion and start peeling their layers, right, to get to the truth. Start peeling the layers to the fact that, you know, they are creating physical and cultural extermination in territories like Colombia and all across the world. And I think, you know, the more we amplify this truth and this reality, the less that, you know, people in general will see these companies as the bearers of the solutions, but the more that we'll be encouraged to actually come together and realize that, you know, it is the people that hold the power. And through learning, you know, through millenary strategies from people such as in the global south that have resisted for over 500 years of colonialism, we can come together, right? We can come together listening to those most affected to you know, to resist these multinationals. And last thing, I think it's also the fact that for me is to remember that they are so few and we are so many. You know, it's probably 10 massive monopolies that are actually leading this crisis. And, you know, if we come together in the millions, you know, we can win and we will.
We love to hear it. I believe that we will win. I wanted to share some ways that you can get involved. This is a little bit more UK focused. So if you wanted to sign up there's a Resist Glencore welcome call on the 11th of July. There's a link to join a fundraiser for the solidarity work, or if you wanted to sign up to volunteer, those are all in the chat. Does anyone else have a question? I saw that there's a request from Natalie from who we can contact. I think maybe one of us would be happy to be in contact with you. Yeah, any other questions from the group? Otherwise, I want to say thank you so much for joining. We have, if you haven't already, you may be signed up to our Climate Reparations newsletter, because this is part of a series of speakers talking about reparations from different angles. And we've got another event happening on the 10th of July as well, which is about debt and climate reparations. So that would be great to see you there too. Other than that, I'll say thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to Miri for speaking and Helena for jumping in at a moment's notice. wanted to say thank you to Elena and Tatiana for doing the translation, which is not their normal job because normally they are climate justice organizers. And that's a difficult task, requires a lot of brain energy. I hope you all have a wonderful day and evening, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Hope you join Resist Glencore. Have a good day.